Hello everyone, today I want to talk about fantasies. I want to talk about the delusional fantasies we live in every single day and how to break through them and live a life that's not fantasy but reality, which is so much richer. Hello everyone, today I want to talk about fantasies, not so much the sexy fantasies, but the fantasies we're always constantly having, the imagination of the world that we use when we could really be living it, and how they really take away from the beauty and the richness and the tapestry of our life with these little commercials we run on top of it. So as always, I'm going to begin with a quote on the subject, and that quote is, "Most human beings spend 50 to 90% or more of their time in their imagination, living fantasy." Charlotte Beck. Recently there was a study by the Harvard University that looked at people's happiness levels and how often, and actually it delved into a particular branch which looked at how often they were thinking about what they were doing right now. And it concluded that the majority of people reviewed in the testing were for more than 50% of their day fantasizing or daydreaming, which is a bit of a shock to me. I didn't realize that people constantly are not in the present moment. So how does this manifest? You're waiting in a checkout line and you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow. You are in the middle of a meeting and you're staring at out into space, hoping that your basketball team wins tomorrow. Now, that's okay, and there were no criticisms made about that particular thought process until when the study looked further on the level of happiness, or the way the self-ranking happiness levels those people had in their life. There was a direct correlation between the people who fantasized less had more fulfilling lives and they rated their lives as being much happier. The people who were constantly in that mind state of thinking about tomorrow or thinking about yesterday recorded levels of much lower happiness. And I mean, that's all we really need to know. Sometimes you don't need to go into the mystical, spiritual element of being present or not living with fantasy, because you just want to be happier, right? And you don't need to worry. If the studies say you're happier when you're in the moment, then that should be enough. I know my personal story involved me I wanted 6 houses. I had this goal, this spreadsheet I used to type up, and I wanted 6 houses, and I thought the rental income from those 6 houses would mean I'd never have to work again. And I'd live in this fantasy. I'd think about what these houses would look like, where they would be, and I constantly felt that until I had those houses, there was something wrong, there was something missing. And I didn't acknowledge that the fantasy was creating that. I just thought, I've seen The Secret, I've seen all these, wonderful motivational people telling us to have goals, to sit and write them down. So I just did it, I followed it thinking that they were correct, until eventually when I looked at the anxiety and stress in my life, I realized I've been creating by these delusions. These delusions, they don't exist. These 6 houses don't exist. And if I wanted 6 houses, thinking and going, yes, I want 6 houses, will not make them come. Being present in the moment and achieving maybe perhaps financial success will allow those houses to come. So why do we live these unhappy fantasies? Well, it's one of the challenges with living in a fantasy world is we fail at creating new habits because of fantasies. If you wanted to get a new body, and you fantasize about all the time, every second you spend fantasizing is a second you're not in the gym taking action. It is constantly removing you from the things you need to do to get it done. We procrastinate because of fantasies. We think, it needs to look this way, or it needs to be a certain way. Sometimes, you might want to start a project of renovating the house, but you think it needs to look a certain way that you can't even start because you're so worried about getting everything right and perfect. We get frustrated with ourselves and other people because of fantasies. I'm so guilty of this. I believe that people should act a certain way, and if they act outside that set fantasy, I get upset, I get frustrated, I get annoyed. I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, I created a make-believe narrative that they should live into, and because how dare they not live into a fantasy and delusion I have, I get angry at them. Now, I know that sounds silly, but that is at the source of 90% of all relationship problems, are simply that the story they've created for the fantasy of the person they're with sometimes doesn't match up to reality, and it creates friction. It's called cognitive dissonance. And the simple step is, don't create these fantasies for these people. Live, be present, observe what they're doing. And we miss out on the wonder of the world because of these fantasies. I don't care how cool your fantasies are. I know I used to have really cool fantasies about trekking around the world and doing all these amazing things. They're just these daydreams, these vague black and white. Quite often these fantasies are in black and white with no depth. There's no feeling, there's no touch. When right now we could be living, we could be here, we could see the beauty in a single blade of grass, see the beauty in a rising sun, see the beauty in a small conversation with someone who wants love and acceptance. So how do we fix this? How do we get out of this delusional living that Harvard says over 50% of us are constantly in? Well, presence. Your birthright, which is to be present and observe the universe, to bring it into reality, is super important. And when you acknowledge from time to time presence, and I've seen people even wearing rubber bands that they flick every once in a while to come back to the moment, is a skill that will be the ultimate skill you can carry through your life. Whether or not you're President of the United States or Secretary General of the United Nations, it doesn't matter. Success is really simply about being present. And every time you come back to the present, to home, and breathe, you're a success as far as the universe is concerned. And that's all I really care about. Acceptance. How things are right now is the only way they could have ever been. And whether you're running simulations in your head on how it could be different is nice, but the reality is that the way things have unfolded right now is beautiful. There's something particularly special about this moment that the universe has taken 14 billion years to create. You need to accept it. Now, at a cognitive level, at a thinking level, we can always say, well, it's not quite warm enough, or this person isn't speaking to me how I'd like. Well, that's okay. But you need to accept that into your life, because the rich narrative of your life will include ups and downs. And by rejecting and not accepting the way things are, you simply force yourself to become delusional. Second to last, not answering the voice. That nattering voice that's telling you, this person or that or yesterday, it's not you. It's a bunch of thoughts circulating that seem to take your attention. Don't answer the voice. Don't get into conversations with that voice. That voice is the ego. It's not you. You are far beyond the ego. You're the awareness of the world. You are the awareness of the ego. You don't have to have a conversation. I see so many people sitting down, worrying, thinking, extrapolating on that little voice in the head. That's really how people go crazy. If you don't get control of that, you'll live a life of misery, because that inner voice is not you. And responding and living your life towards someone who's not you is only going to create pain. And finally, curiosity. Yes, it's nice to look at travel brochures to go trekking through Burma, but it's also nice to take a look around the people around you and notice how they're breathing and what their goals and dreams are and how they've got to where they are. There is much beauty in every curious question you can ask about the moment as there is in any novel or big budget movie. Stay curious, stay passionate, because this is a crazy, mysterious world, and quite often we forget that because we live in these crazy fantasies. Right now, if you're curious and ask questions about the people around you, the beautiful environments you're in, it'll bring you into the moment and you can learn about the real world, not the fantasy world. Something to think about. The more information we get about leaving the moment and the unhappiness it creates, the more we really just need to put our time back into presence and acceptance, rather than worrying about acquiring new skills that won't help much if we're constantly fantasizing about those new skills. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. This is something to think about. Until then, goodbye.